back on the record, and we'll start with an apology from me. It's 1:13 right now. I did say 1:10. Sorry for wasting 3 minutes of your time. You know, sincerely. Anyway, exactly. We're at this point. We're finished with the cross-examination. Is that where the stage rep? Okay, please.
Chad, is it okay if I call you Chad?
Of course, it is easier.
We know each other from a couple of leads in the past, correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Chad, have you ever been involved in applying for a Class D permit?
Personally or business wise, I guess it's the question I would ask.
Either one with the public, have you ever been involved in applying for a Class D permit?
In my work with Republic, I have been involved in applying for a transfer of a Class C permit.
That's a different process than the application, correct?
Correct.
You indicated that a lot of the customers that you provide, that Republic provides roll-off service to, are not necessarily under contract, but you do make them sign a customer service agreement, is that correct?
That is correct.
And can you explain to me the difference between a customer service agreement versus a contract?
I would say that the customer service agreement and a contract are one and the same. I believe the question that was, do we have long-term contracts in our industrial system? So yes, it would still be a contract, but that contract could be or the customer service agreement could be for 2 days, or it could be for a year, depending on what the needs were of that customer.
And does Republic use, is there a form that you use for those customer service agreements?
Yes, there is.
And is that, if you were gonna have a customer enter a longer term contract for roll-off service, is that a different form that you would use for that, or?
It would depend on the customer and the length of the contract.
And potentially what their needs are.
Correct.
And in terms of those customer service agreements, are there penalties or anything like that associated with breaking the terms of that customer service agreement?
Specifically speaking about industrial business, the C&D business alone, no, there's not.
Does Republic typically share its business plan with competitors?
No, we do not.
You testified earlier this morning that everyone who said that they've waited weeks for a container delivery from Republic is not telling the truth, is that correct?
I do not believe that is what I said.
Explain to me what you said.
I believe I said I did not think that we had people waiting for weeks to get service. And I will clarify that by saying we do on occasion have customers that call us and schedule boxes out 30 or 45 days in advance. So they could, technically they could be waiting 30 or 45 days, but it's their choice to schedule it out that far.
So I think you talked a little bit about Brian West with Morgan Contractors and his testimony from yesterday.
Correct.
And so was he not telling the truth in his testimony when he talked about the delays?
Not knowing the exact specifics, and I can look back at Mr. Morgan's accounts for the past, since he's day one, since he's been a customer with us, and try to guess which account it was. I don't know if it was the one that I was thinking of or not. I will not say that he was lying, but I won't say that he was telling the truth either, because I do not know the exact account.
talked about a little bit about in your testimony this morning about a local sheriff that had applied for a Class D permit. Do you recall whether or not that local sheriff had any relevant garbage hauling experience when he applied?
I did not testify that he applied for a permit. I testified that he owned a garbage company and then was elected sheriff of that county. So he was a sheriff and a garbage man at the same time.
Are you familiar with, you talked a little bit about customer service, and how that works. It sounds like there's a centralized call center not located in Montana, is that right?
And I should clarify that because we, at one point prior to COVID, we did have centralized call centers. Now all of our customer service agents are remote workers working from home. We don't have a centralized call center around anymore. We have customer service agents in our Northwest area. We've got some customer service agents that actually live in Montana. They work from home, they answer the phone, and they act as a customer service agent for us.
Did Republic, I recall that they opened some customer service centers before the pandemic. Did they close those down?
Correct, and everything now since the pandemic is the remote workers that working from home.
How does Republic define what constitutes a customer complaint?
The definition is very broad. You know, if somebody calls out and has an issue, missed pickup, pretty much anything, unless they're calling to start service or just a general inquiry, it would really probably be considered a complaint.
And how does Republic define a denial of service for a customer?
Could you clarify that question for me, please?
So we asked, in our data requests, we asked how many denials for requests for roll-off service existed or occurred since January 1 of 2020. And so I'm just interested in how you assisted with responding to those requests.
Correct.
So I guess I'm interested in hearing your opinion of what you consider to be a denial of service in that instance.
My opinion is we've never denied service to a customer in our service area.
And you indicated that occasionally there's delays that you might not be aware of a customer waiting for weeks for a container. Is that right? Is that right?
Yes.
If a customer was offered a container but would have to wait 4 weeks for that delivery, but they needed it now, would that be considered a denial of service under Republic's definition?
I would say that, yeah, that would be a denial of service, but I will also answer by saying we would not do that.
So anybody that testified to that actually happening would be not telling the truth?
I would say yes.
Okay. How many roll-off containers does Republic currently have? And if you don't remember.
No, I mean, I can generalize it, but I guess I would like you to clarify that a little more because that number could be astronomical if you're just talking how many containers Republic has.
Just in general, right, across the country.
Hundreds of thousands.
Right. So obviously I'm not talking about that. If we had asked how many containers Republic has for use in the proposed service areas, I apologize, my question was not clear.
I would say roughly 400.
Okay. How many, and we asked this question in Discovery about how many people does Republic employ that assist with providing construction and debris services in the proposed service area? And
how many were in the discovery request or how many we had?
well, I'm not gonna test your knowledge against the discovery request. I have you here, so I'd rather just ask you the question.
I will say that currently we have 12 to 13 drivers that are certified to drive the industrial trucks, and we have 10 industrial trucks right now.
Are there other Republic employees located in the proposed service area, so that 5-county area, that assist with providing construction, debris, waste hauling services?
I'm not 100% sure of your question, but if you're asking that if some of our customers that are, or excuse me, some of our employees that are in big timber or roundup assist with the pickup of industrial customers, it would depend on the day, but for the most part, all of our drivers leave for the Z shape.
And so I've heard you use this term industrial customers, so I mean, I do know quite a bit about trash and garbage after the last 10 years, but explain to me what you mean when you say industrial customers.
When I say industrial customers, I mean our big 10 to 40 yard roll-off box customers. We consider small container or 2 to 8 yard commercial and then residential, so obviously residential.
And do you know on average about how many roll-off or industrial customers that Republic serves per quarter in the proposed service area?
Not off the top of my head.
Excuse me, can we take just 2 seconds? I seem to have like locked up, sorry.
No, you're very important.
So obviously we're off the record. Just-
Yeah, that would be fine, that would be
Just
great.
right now.
I can't remember. Thank you.
Where did you get testimony?
I got through when, I got everything up to where I stopped you,
Can you
so.
read the last
Let me
question?
Okay.
pull it up.
That's right.
Do you know on average how many roll-off or industrial customers that Republic Services serves per quarter in the proposed service area? And it was not off the top of my head.
Can you turn to exhibit Q, page 4, please?
Yes, we are back on the record. Forgot to skip.
I believe that answer Republic provided is somewhere on that page, so if you want to take a look at that, Chad, and then let me know if that refreshes your recollection.
Since 2020, Republic estimates it has provided roll-off services for an average of 168 customers per quarter in Yellowstone, Carbon, Stillwater, Golden Valley, and Muscle Shoals counties.
And based on your testimony, and your experience in the garbage industry, and what you know about the business, are those the only customers, roll-off customers in this proposed service area that need service?
No, I would say that there are other customers in the area.
Can you tell me off the top of your head, Chad, what are the PSC numbers involved in Republic's protest of anti-roll-offs application, this proposed service area?
I believe it's PSC 1581, and I do not know the subs. There's a plethora of subs under that number.
Is PSC number 3819 also involved?
Yes, PSC 3819 is our Lewistown PSC number, which services Golden Valley and Muscle Shoals.
Do you have any idea how many customers Republic has in Golden Valley County? Roll-off customers?
Not off the top of my head, I do not.
Does Republic charge roll-off customers fuel recovery fees?
Objection beyond the scope of direct.
What's the question again?
Does Republic charge roll-off customers fuel recovery fees?
That's been covered in the data request. Does that qualify it at all?
I don't believe that there's been any direct questioning on this subject thus far. At least not in my direct questioning of Mr. Bauer, so respectfully.
So what is I'm trying to understand the specific nature of your objection.
Sure, so generally, the cross-examination of a witness could cover the same matters that were discussed on direct examination. And in this case, I don't believe we discussed any price or fee structure or any of those sort of subjects during the course of direct examination. So if there are other witnesses that Ms. Garrett wants to question that do bring that up on direct, I have no objection to that, but in this case, it's beyond the scope of this direct examination.
Ms. Garrett.
And so Commissioner O'Donnell, if Republic has a different witness that it is going to call, that it would prefer that I address these questions too, I certainly will do that. But for purposes of our case, the applicant has the burden. And if we're going to limit the scope of the cross-examination to direct testimony, I have no other opportunity to address Republic's witnesses. And so I will not be able to respond to the issues that they've raised.
And what was your specific request?
My request was about the fuel, or my question to Mr. Bauer, or
Yeah.
Was whether the industrial customers, roll-off service customers for Republic are charged fuel recovery fees.
Seems to be in the list of witnesses that there are employees of Republic that would be very well qualified to answer that question. It might be more appropriate.
And so, I mean, the risk here is that if I'm not allowed to, and certainly, again, I'll abide by the chair's ruling, but the risk here is that if Republic does not call any witnesses other than Mr. Bauer, and decides to rest their case on conclusion, if they want to suggest who I should direct those questions to at this point in time, then I would be willing to withdraw the question.
In my 7 1/3 years, no one has ever withdrawn, witnesses that they've pre-scheduled. That's an interesting conundrum.
I have actually had that happen with Republic in another public service commission hearing. I think it was before your tenure.
Yes. There wasn't a life before my tenure. As far as I'm concerned.
I would agree with you.
Thank you. One moment. After consulting my guru, sage and wise advice, that's an interesting question. Does Republic intend to produce a witness later on who might be capable of answering this question or approaching this subject?
To directly answer your question, I think we'll have witnesses that are capable of answering the subject, but to be clear, I don't know that Republic intends to discuss the subject with those witnesses, and to the extent that the applicant feels that this was an important portion of her important issue to address, that is why the applicant had the opportunity to present their case, and it's not Republic's duty to provide them issues to discuss.
But just out of curiosity, what standing does the that request have that was all sworn testimony? But can none of that be referenced as already, discussed? Is there no standing of any of the stuff that was recorded there?
I'm not sure if that was directed to me or Ms. Garrett. I'm sure.
Well, either one, but go ahead.
So I think that if to the extent that the exhibits have been referenced during the course of direct examination, that certainly opens the subject in the cross-examination of the same witness. And I think that's certainly true when those exhibits have been introduced into evidence and then spoken about with the witness. Excuse me. If an exhibit was discussed but not introduced, I would maintain the same position that it could be brought up in cross-examination if the subject was brought up in direct examination. But in this case, I don't believe, and I'm certainly happy to be corrected, but I don't believe that any portion of my direct examination discussed this subject. So for the purposes of cross-examination here for Mr. Bauer, I do not believe it's appropriate.
Ms. Garrett is studying right now. To give her a moment to.
Well, so here's a couple options, I think, for the commission, in terms of allowing the applicant to address this issue. The commission, as in effect, the court, Your Honor, under Rule 611, controls the mode and order of interrogation of witnesses. What I can do is on rebuttal, call Mr. Bauer or whatever Republic witnesses are in the room separately, and directly examine them about this fuel recovery fee issue, because I do think it's important. I do want to talk about overall general revenue of Republic, and I don't necessarily have to put that on in my case in chief, but those are, the option is to, let's move forward, I can address this now outside the scope, recognizing that it's outside the scope, or I can call Mr. Bauer or some other witness that Republic proposes on rebuttal.
So are you saying that the only time that Ms. Garrett can bring up something is if you have introduced it in your case? So the revenues of the company, if you don't bring them up, that she can't cross-examine on that subject?
So to answer your question, I think there's perhaps three ways that Ms. Garrett could bring up, that any party, and this is true, I think, of any party here, that any party could bring up a subject. One is through the direct examination of their witnesses, whichever witnesses they choose to call. And their ability to discuss subjects is, I think, subject largely to the relevance of the issue. For the cross-examination of a witness, of another party's witness, their cross-examination is limited to whatever matters were brought up during direct testimony, a direct examination. And then the third method that I think Ms. Garrett correctly alluded to was if she wishes to call a rebuttal witness to rebut testimony that's been given elsewhere in the course of the proceedings. That's certainly her.
Well, you mentioned about her ability to bring things up during her case, but none of her witnesses would have any idea whatever about the financing of Republic. So they wouldn't have been an appropriate person to bring this up to. Ms. Garrett.
And Commissioner O'Donnell, one other just point on this in terms of identifying witnesses, things like that. Part of the reason I include any witnesses listed by Republic on my pre-hearing memorandum is so that we can address these kind of issues on cross-examination. Or at least that's one of the reasons I do that.
That seems to be persuasive to me.
again, I think if Ms. Garib wants to call a witness of her own, Ms. Garib's limit on witnesses is subject only to her own discretion, right? And so Republic is not obligated to provide her witnesses, though she certainly could have listed those and called them during her case in chief. And I am not opining as to the wisdom of doing or not doing so at all, but that's her choice, and I'm certainly not suggesting otherwise.
Well, okay, one moment. What else? My agent, a wise advisor, has elaboration.
So, clearly Commissioner O'Donnell was chairing this proceeding, but he is going to delegate to me, the authority to rule on this, so. Your objection is noted. And certainly a relevant objection, however, I'm gonna overrule your objection on several grounds. One is that, clearly during the direct examination of this witness, the operations of the company, particularly its financial status, though not this particular question, was brought up, so I think it's within the scope of direct. The second thing is, of course, just like any judicial proceeding, the court can always determine for itself what evidence it believes it needs or wants to hear, and I think under that grounds we will overrule your objection, but if you would like to put a continuing objection on the record, I will certainly accept that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Purcell?
Please note the objection, but thank you very much for considering this.
Certainly. Okay, Ms. Garib, you may proceed.
Sorry for that, Chad.
No problem.
Do your Republic's industrial customers, are they charged fuel recovery fees?
Yes.
Do you know? Can you turn to, let's look at exhibit Q. Page 3.
Q is West.
It is a data request.
What, so
Exhibit Q, page 3. There. So, Chad, in there I asked, Republic identified what its large container revenue was for 2022.
Correct.
See that there?
Yes,
Can you tell me what that number is?
2022 was $4,122,576.
And how does Republic define large container revenue? Is that, is it industrial customers? Are there other categories included in that?
No, that would be our industrial customers.
And so then, lower on that page, it says roll-off container services comprise 97.5% of large container revenue in 2022.
Yes, I do.
What is, or do you know what comprises the other, is it 2.5%? I can't do that.
Yeah, it's 2.5%. It's non-regulated recycling revenue.
Okay, perfect. And so this 4,122,576 that was identified, would that include revenue, large container revenue under PSC number 1581?
Yes,
And under PSC number 3819.
2022. I am not 100% sure that would have included, I believe it did, but I'm not 100% sure.
I wanna look at exhibit V. I believe it's Republic's annual reports for 2022. I have it in there somewhere.
V as in Victor.
V, yes, and Richard. And so I think the first one is 1581. Can you tell me what the total 2022 revenue on PSC number 1581 is?
Total revenue,
Yes.
$68,035,687.
And then I think 3819 is also there for 2022.
2022, yes,
Can you tell me what the total revenue is for that one?
$2,297,521.
Okay, so a little over 68 million for PSC number 1581 in 2022 and 2,297,521 for 3819.
Correct.
And so is it the total there, a little over 70,000 or 70 million?
Correct.
Bad number. Okay. And so the portion of that $70+ million that was from large container revenue is this 4,122,576, right?
In the protested, or in the, service area that is, the applicant is being, correct.
Okay. I think that's all the questions I have for this witness.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Carey. So PSC attorneys have any questions? No? Yes, please.
Hello,
Hello.
one brief clarifying question. Can you identify what part of Stillwater County Allied is authorized to provide service in?
I believe we're authorized in all of Stillwater County, but I would have to look at the permit to double check that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brown?
First thing I'd ask is our legal counsel to identify yourself. For the record.
For the record, my name is Amanda Webster, Webster, and I'm a staff attorney for the Montana Public Service Commission.
Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Bowers. I just want to just clarify or understand your testimony. So I think you said that Golden Valley County data service for your Lewistown operation? Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, President Brown, depending on where in the county it is, it could be serviced out of our Lewistown operation, or it could be serviced out of buildings, one or the other.
So is the same, how about Muscle Shell, is that the same as well?
Mr. Chairman, President Brown, no, Muscle Shell County is serviced out of our buildings operation.
No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Lukacek, any questions for this witness?
Yes, I have 3 questions.
Please, go ahead.
The first 2 are related. Regarding the large and complex service area in question in this hearing, my understanding is that Montana Roll-Offs plans to start out slow and build up as the customer base builds and as equipment that they purchase allows. Not their plan, to my understanding, has never been to try to meet every customer's need, but in 5 counties, but rather serving on a first come, first served basis. So back to the question they had where you were saying they don't think it's feasible that they could provide service. If you take into consideration the first come, first served basis, does that seem feasible and useful for some customer needs?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lukacek?
Yes,
That's really a difficult question to answer, as we could talk about that all day, and we've talked about in proceedings before. That, you know, when these permits are issued, there is a dollar value associated with these permits, and encompassing a 5-county service area and applying for a permit in a 5-county service area, we as current permitted haulers are required to offer service to every customer in those permitted service areas. So by allowing someone to just come in and start with 1 truck and 10 boxes, I think is a disservice to the other folks that currently have permits. Because those folks will be looking for business close to home, close to the landfill, and trying to grow their business with very dense service areas prior to expanding into those rural communities. And I don't know how long it would take for them to be able to offer service to Stillwater County, the edges of Carver County, Golden Valley County, Muscle Shell County, as those are quite a large distance from where their current base of operations, where they're suggesting it would be.
so that permit that you're saying is required, that you have to, in order to get the permit, you have to be able to provide service to all. What permit is that?
That's
that
the I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lukacek. That's the public convenience and necessity permit through the Public Service Commission that we have.
That
So
says,
if a customer in Golden Valley called me tomorrow and said, I need a roll-off box, I'm obligated to make sure that I give that customer the pricing and the opportunity and to have that roll-off box if they so choose.
okay. Okay, my second question is related, and it's to that first one. If you consider their plan for first come, first serve for their customers, can you speculate? I understand you were saying because you don't know the business plan, you can't, fully explain how it would adversely affect Republic's ability to provide services. But if you take it as the first come, first serve, if they were able to get approval and they operated that way, can you speculate how somebody operating on a first come, first serve basis would adversely affect Republic's ability to provide services?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lukacek, I can speculate to the extent of their testimony that they were talking about their own customers being first come, first serve. And without having an established business or having the equipment to service those prospective customers, I do not believe I can really say how that would affect us. I know that didn't really answer your question, and I'm trying to figure out a way to clarify, but I'm not sure I can clarify your question.
Okay, well, thank you for trying. So the third question I have, now you talked about the average waiting time being 24 to 48 hours. And I'm thinking instead of average, maybe you meant typical, because average would be averaging in the 2 to 3 month wait at Red Lodge. So I'm thinking you mean typical rather than average.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Lukacek, the 2 or 3 month wait at Red Lodge was a one-time act of God event with the flood. And we still did not have customers waiting 2 or 3 months to get roll-off boxes. The testimony from Mr. Morgan suggested that he waited 2 months to get his box hauled. And that very well could have happened, not knowing all of the circumstances beyond that. But no, I am will stand beside the 24 to 72 hours that I had stated in my testimony earlier on average.
Okay, because average means taking all of them and then taking the average of all of them. And is there data to support that? Because typical would be an estimate on your part, average would be as though there's a way to get the numerical average. I guess it's not, maybe not that important. I'm just curious. Okay, so this is my actual question. Does Republic have a record of transactions with customers by which we can check on the veracity of the claims that Republic customers have been made to wait weeks for service? Because they're saying that has happened and you're saying it hasn't. So I'm wondering if there's any kind of record that we can have an ability, instead of he said, to actually have a record of that.
Yes, Commissioner.
I think this is an appropriate time to remind Commissioner Lukacek that in Class D PCN cases, we have a burden of proof requirement that is handed down by the Montana legislature. In these types of proceedings, Commissioner Lukacek, say versus our rate-making type proceedings, it's the parties themselves that define what the record is for purposes of our decision-making. In our rate-making proceedings, which I know you're thinking of right now, we have far more flexibility to request or require information, and so your request is beyond the scope of this proceeding, Commissioner Lukacek.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bukacek, did you want to rephrase or reapproach the subject?
I don't see how to. Thank you, though. Thank you for the offer.
Thank you. Mr. Brower, I do have some questions. It struck me from the testimony that we've heard, in particular from Mr. Emmons, who has unique experience with knowledge of the workings of your company, that your job in particular must be really, really difficult, in that you have to satisfy the needs of your customers and your employees and your employer as well. He indicated to me that typically 1/2 of orders that apparently you would place were actually delivered. I'm sure that when you asked for 50 more dumpsters, that excuse the word, boxes, and only 25 delivered, you called for 50 because you needed 50 to perform the services. So if you only got half of what you reasonably requested, then doesn't that impair your functionality, your ability to perform the services that you really want to offer the community?
Mr. Chairman, I am not going to slander Mr. Emmons, but I will say that Mr. Emmons is not part of the leadership or management team. Mr. Emmons is not part of any part of us ordering our capital or any trucks or dumpsters, boxes, whatever it may be. And Mr. Emmons consequently has no knowledge of how many boxes we order or if we only get half of a load. No, I request my capital when I need it, and I can tell you that 99% of the time I get what I order, what I ask for.
Okay, Mr. Emmons also seemed to indicate that it was a common occurrence, that there would be deficiencies in operation of the vehicles, but they weren't up to the DOT standard, that where they had to be withheld or locked off, and that it was almost a matter of course is that things would not get fixed, and that they would be just said parts on order, or there'd be standard responses just to fill in the blank type of thing. And he indicated that especially in terms of the ABS not being working, and that if applying brakes would lock up the brakes and cause a slide on the whole thing, which would endanger other people as well as your own equipment and that particular driver. That's worrisome to me. Could you talk about that, the responsiveness of the company to fixing driver indicated deficiencies?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be more than happy to, and I will not sit here and not be transparent and say that we have had challenges in our shop. We had some employees that may not have been doing what they were supposed to be doing, and those employees no longer work for the company. I will tell you that our trucks will not leave the yard or the shop if they are not DOT ready. We will not put a truck on the road that is not DOT ready to be out there. The issues with the ABS that you're talking about that Mr. Emmons brought up, that is not a DOT downable offense for the Montana DOT. All of those issues have been addressed. I have brought in, we were shorthanded on techs. I brought in some what we call SOS technicians from our Washington operations to help us get through a challenging time of waiting and not being able to hire good qualified techs. And I also brought in an outside tech from Peterbilt to specifically address those issues. So I'm 100% confident that every truck that leaves our yard that's on the road is DOT certified and able to operate safely.
But DOT certification, that's like something is really, really serious. But the other things that don't rise to that level, it seemed to me that what he was saying is that common knowledge among the drivers is that things don't get fixed until they rise to the DOT level.
Mr. Chairman, I would disagree with that to a certain aspect. I mean, there are at times with when we were short-staffed that we would concentrate on the DOT downable repairs prior to repairing things that would be nice to have. We, like everyone else, also experienced some very large delays in manufacturing and shipping of parts. So there were at times that we did not have an estimated date of arrival for the parts to fix that truck, and they would write on the VCRs, parts are on order. We do have a system set up at our shop where we've got a whiteboard. It shows every truck that's down. It shows when we expect it to be up, and it also shows when the parts were ordered and when they're expected to be delivered. So our drivers do know where their trucks are at and when they're going to be repaired.
Thank you. So a lot has been made by counsel for your company in terms of the amount of equipment, the level of equipment and capitalization that the applicant has. And the applicant, just like your opinion on this, has said, well, of course we haven't spent any money because we don't have a license, and it would be foolish to invest $300,000 if you don't know if you're going to be able to be in business. That seems to make sense to me. So, but your legal team has been stressing that as if that is a reason for not allowing them to operate, and that seems funny to me. And you're a successful business person. I'd like to know what your opinion is of that.
Mr. Chairman, I think my opinion of that is if the commission were to grant the authority to apply for, that is not even close to the amount of capital needed to start this business. It would be a much higher number than that.
Okay, thank you. There have been questions asked and answered about the reputation of your company and McKinsey, but your company in particular. And it has been asserted that the company enjoys, well, that's the wrong word to use, enjoys a bad reputation, but it's not enjoyable, but doesn't have a good reputation for timeliness and responsiveness. So if that is the general impression, then I wanted to ask, if that is not true, and Republic enjoys a good reputation, then if a new company enters the field, why would anybody choose to do business with them other than you an established business why did you lose any customers to somebody if you're doing such a good job?
Mr. Chairman, I fully agree with you. We shouldn't ever lose any customers to a competitor, but there are people that want to see if the grass is greener on the other side of the field. So I can understand somebody looking to go to a different hauler or different competitor. I think, I will say that maybe 2 or 3 years ago, the reputation of Republic in this market was not spectacular. But I will say that I think we have worked very hard over the last 18 months to ensure that our customers are getting the service that they're asking for, and they're getting it in a timely manner. And for the most part, I think our customers in this market are happier than they were 18 to 24 months ago.
So if I understand you correctly, then you think that a few people might look for greener pastures, but would that significantly harm your business or any other business if a few people here and there?
Again, it would be speculation on my part, Mr. Chairman, to answer that, because can you viably run a multi-million-dollar business with a handful of customers? I don't know. I don't think you can. So losing a handful of customers here or there, I mean, in the long run, I don't think it's viable for the new company to assume that it's not going to harm us if they're only having a handful of customers.
Well, thank you for that. One of the criteria that we are supposed to look at is whether or not there is not just harm, but harm of a significant nature, a violation of the public interest, that your counsel was good to add on to that. So if a few customers go away, is that any major harm? I mean, if the company is operating on a 2% profit margin, then I can understand that. Being that your company is successful, been around for a long time, very large company, with the number 3 in the country, I think, that you operate on, I have no idea what the margin is, but I don't think that it's 2%. So it's not going to really be of any harm, even if they operate 50 boxes to your 400. It's not going to be that great. And it just, I'm having trouble with understanding the nature of all of the witnesses that the applicant has had, talking about the extreme need for more boxes in the county, and to square that with your assertion that everything is taken care of and you're operating very quickly. So help me to understand the difference between those two things. Are you saying that the witnesses along that line are mistaken?
Mr. Chairman, I firmly believe in my mind that if there was a substantial need for another construction and demolition company in this 5-county service area, there would be more than 3 shipper affidavits and more than 3 people out of, I don't know, 350,000 people in this 5-county area that would have come forward to say that.
But isn't it true that the real test is whether or not somebody else has proved it, whether or not they survive?
Mr. Chairman, can you rephrase that question? I'm not sure what you're asking.
One moment, please. so, I believe that is all my questions, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your testimony. At this point, this is for, recross. Yeah, recross, yeah, exactly.
Recross is-
Okay, yeah,
So what should we do with that store?
okay, Ms. Garrett,
I have no further questions for this witness.
Just for Sal, one further question, Mr. Chair.
skip over. I was gonna get to you.
So he's gonna do read. So Mr. Singer,
Oh, okay,
Mr. Singer, you were, do you have any questions?
I appreciate that. I'm trying to wait until all the talking's done. I'm not going to ask any questions. Mr. Priscilla is welcome to proceed.
All right, Mr. Priscilla, so this will be the opportunity for not only to do recross, but your continually.
Mr. Chairman, I still have two questions. I apologize. Two very brief things. The first one is, I heard you say earlier, we were talking about I believe with Ms. Garrett, estimates of the number of customers served per quarter over the last several years. And you had indicated that there may very well be other customers in the area that need service in addition to those. But just to be clear, there are other service providers already authorized to provide service to those customers, correct?
Correct, the other customers are McKinsey and City of Lawrence customers.
So the other question I had for you, we were talking about orders of new equipment for the Republic of the area. And I understood your point about you are ordering what you need and you're getting what you need. However, in that 1% chance where you order and it cannot be fulfilled to the extent that you need it, can you talk very briefly about what your other options are to pull equipment for those to meet those needs?
Yeah, that is one of the benefits to working for a larger corporation, and we have hundreds of operations across the United States where we can pull equipment, trucks, drivers, if needed to fulfill the needs of our customers.
Nothing further. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioners.
sure. Is it okay, Ms. Garrett, to temporarily or permanently excuse? You anticipate any,
I don't anticipate further questioning with Mr. Bell.
okay, Mr. Garrett, then you are permanently excused.
Thank you,
You're
Chair.
welcome to stay.
Oh, I will be here.
I expected so, that's why I said that. We're shifting again to tag team.
Doing the best we can, Mr. Chairman.
Is it Mr. Dickinson?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. If we could take maybe just a 5-minute break,
Sure.
we call our next witness.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
We're on the record for until, let's say 2:20, thank you.
Oh.
Let's get back on the record here, folks. Okay, back to, Republic's, chief,
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Republic calls its next witness, Mr. Jim Hutchinson.
Jim Hutchison, did you say?
Hutchinson, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Is that recall you were for swearing in yesterday, is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you very much.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Hutchinson. If you could please state your name for the record.
Sure, my legal name is James Hutchinson, Hutchinson.
And Mr. Hutchinson, go by Jim.
I go by Jim.
You mind if I call you Jim?
Please do.
All right. Jim, where do you live?
I live in a small town called Maple Valley, Washington.
And where do you work?
I work out of the northwest area, or my office is in Redmond, Washington. But I oversee an area that consists of 9 states.
And who do you work for?
I work for Republic Services. My direct boss is Ryan Lawler, who's the area president.
How long have you worked for Republic?
I work literally coming up on 12 years now.
I'd like to ask a little bit about your background as well. Did you go to college?
I did undergraduate. I had a public relations and an international business degree from Central Washington University and a law degree from Seattle University.
And what did you do after graduating law school for work?
After graduating from law school, I was working, well, technically I went to the evening program, so I was working full time there. So when I started law school, I was working for the Washington State House of Representatives, and I ended up becoming the Director of Government Affairs for the Bellevue, Washington Chamber of Commerce. And then I began work for Puget Sound Energy as their local government community relations manager. Was there for 12 years working on natural gas and electrical infrastructure. And then I started at Republic Services.
My understanding is you also have a military background. Is that accurate?
I do. My wife reminds me that I wasn't home a lot because while I was also through the evening program, I also served 8 years as a reservist in the U.S. Army Reserves as a civil affairs specialist.
You talked about the work that you do for Republic, or at least the area. You said there was 9 states that you generally have, I guess, authority over. Is that the right word? Or?
Yeah, so my job title is Director of Municipal Sales, and that's a loose definition of sales, is that we work typically with governments through, and it's technically more than 9 states. We have personnel in 9 states, but we also include Alaska and in Vancouver, Canada. But the states that we do have personnel in are Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Colorado, Utah, Montana, Wyoming, and now New Mexico.
And as the Northwest Regional Director for Republic, which includes the region of Montana, what does your job entail?
So on any given day, I will work with 14 different team members. Currently I have 2 vacancies there, so if anybody's looking for a job. But 14 different team members that work directly with governments, whether that is a government contract, a permit, like here in Montana, whether it's a franchise in Oregon, or what they call a G certificate in Washington State. So various issues there. And then we also do all the community relations and the public relations, as well as the, like I said, government affairs on all of the big issues around recycling and EPR and emissions, et cetera.
I believe you talked about it a little bit, but your work goes beyond just municipal sales. Is that accurate?
Correct. As an area team, so I report up to, as I mentioned, Ryan Lawler, who's our area president. We as an area team have functional leads where we talk, and I'm one of those functional leads, But we also have functional leads in HR and safety that roll up to our director of operations support. We also have AVPs, and we go through the financial data. So we have our finance manager there too that act as an executive team for that area president. And so we go through everything from soup to nuts. And in fact, if I was not here today, I'd be going through the month-end reviews with my other counterparts for our 17 business units throughout our area.
So you're glad to be testifying here today,
I
correct?
am very much glad to be testifying because Monday and Tuesday, we were going through one of the SOX requirements, which is to financially review how all of our business units are working, and we will go through them quite rigorously. So getting arrested is nice.
Okay. As the Northwest Area Director for Municipal Sales, are you familiar with Republic's operations in the state of Montana?
Yes.
And how are you familiar with Republic's operations in the state of Montana?
So I've been not only have I been with Republic for 12 years, but I've been in this role for 12 years. So working through the state of Montana, I've been involved in the acquisitions we've had in Montana, which has expanded our service territory on a number of occasions. I've worked through the government affairs issues that we've had in Missoula. I've testified before in front of the PSC on various issues, as well as some of the court cases we've had where we get disagreements with other.
And generally speaking, how often do you travel to Montana as part of your job with Republic?
So as part of my job responsibilities, it's supposed to be at a minimum once a quarter. However, issues come up, I'm here usually probably every other month, depending on the issues that come up. It may be for the legislative chamber days in Helena, it may be for a community event where we have a National Neighborhood Promise grant that we're giving to the Missoula YMCA. So it really depends, but usually on average, it's at least a couple times, maybe once every other month.
And could you briefly describe how Republic is organized to operate in the state of Montana, the business structure itself?
Sure, we have two business units that we break the state up into Eastern Montana and Western Montana. That is a result of an acquisition we had just a few years ago when it was Montana Waste up north. And we've changed the boundaries of those areas a little bit from time to time. Earlier you had somebody testify that they had a GM change. Well, it was not because the GM moved, but it was because we changed buildings into a different area to try and make sure we get the best coverage we have. But each one of those business units is run by a general manager, and very similar to the how I explained the areas involved. The general manager has a number of key personnel that works with them as that general manager's executive team.
So obviously Montana is a large state, so it sounds like there's two separate business units in the state of Montana?
Correct.
What business unit is the Billings and surrounding communities located in? Is there a particular name for that business unit?
That's Eastern Montana, one headed by Chad Bauer.
And so, yeah, can you explain who is the general manager for the Eastern Montana unit?
That's Chad Bauer. Chad, interestingly enough, when Chad returned to Republic Services, I actually hired him as one of my team members as my meeting manager. And then when he got promoted from that role into the general manager position about 2 years ago, that's when we hired an additional person there to cover the meetings.
And then where does Mr. Bauer rank in terms of hierarchy with respect to you? Is he's below you or above you or equal? How would you describe that?
Yeah, so the way we break up the hierarchy is the business units will report up through the area structure. And so if you were looking for a solid line, we typically keep that in an operation. So our COO, basically our area presidents, report up to the COO. The general manager, the area president, we have 2 AVPs, area vice presidents, that the general managers report up to. I'm on par with the AVPs. So Chad does not directly report to me, but there's still an overall responsibility that I have for the area.
And as part of your job as the Northwest Area Director of Municipal Sales, are you familiar with Republic's roll-off services in Eastern Montana business unit?
Yes.
And how are you familiar with that?
Well, through a number of cases that we've had before the PSC, we also, in terms of the conversations we had with the asset allocations, we talk about, hey, where are those assets gonna go, how are they gonna be distributed? And so each year when we're doing similar to what I was just referring to, those SOX requirements, we call them DORs, DOR. When we go through those DOR requirements, we go through each line of business and review how each line of business is performing. So whether it's a residential service or whether it's commercial service or industrial, as Chad alluded to earlier, we look at them individually. And if we see a problem with any one of those areas, either financially and or equipment wise, we'll dive deep into those areas and we'll have reviews on those to determine what's the cause or what's the root cause of those problems.
And based on your years of experience, are you familiar with what you believe it takes to be a successful roll-off provider in the Billings area and the surrounding communities?
Yes, I mean, I have lived through and witnessed a number of permits that have been issued that have been successful, and a number of permits that have been issued that have not been successful. And I've seen the data that's been required and discussed, and how the PSC has outlined the types of information that they're requiring to make the determination of how successful a company will be.
And in your view, what are some of the attributes that make a service provider successful in providing those roll-off services in Billings communities and surrounding communities?
Well, step one is a plan, right? You have to figure out, hey, what and how are you gonna provide the services, and figure out, hey, how am I gonna actually be able to fund those services? Doesn't mean you go out and get the loan, I know that was alluded to earlier, but it means you may at least have a plan to say, how are you going to accomplish those things? So you don't just simply start by saying, hey, I'm gonna do this, without saying, hey, this is how I'm going to do this. I always emphasize with my team members, you really need to make a plan, and then you need to work the plan if you're gonna be successful. And whether that's through a contract with a municipality, or whether you're gonna run a business or anything of that nature. So we start by looking at the fundamentals of, okay, what is your plan for providing service? And I'll give you the case in point. When we do a contract with a municipality, we get into the details of that plan. We have a financial model together at Performa, where we look at saying, well, how many driveways are you gonna be able to accomplish with how many people are you gonna be able to do, how many assets are you gonna have to have. And so we look through all of those elements to determine, hey, is this contract going to be successful? Do we have the right resources? We're gonna have the right divide. And you at least have a plan. It doesn't mean you've won the contract, but it means you've developed a financial plan to say, hey, if we win the contract, these are the things we gotta do in order to make it happen.
What role do employees have in providing successful roll-off services to the general public?
Well, employees of all shapes and sizes are critical. We don't.
Yeah, let's start at the very boots on the ground employees that provide the services. What role do they have in providing that service to public?
Well, I think it was mentioned earlier in some of the earlier testimony, customer service, right? I don't pick up material when I'm on an airplane. I don't pick up material when I'm at a meeting, financial meeting. So the men and women that we have that are boots on the ground, picking up the containers, they are critical to our success and our customer zeal. During the pandemic, for instance, we had a program where we call it Committed to Serve, where we emphasize the fact that, hey, the women and men who are driving and picking up material on the streets, they're the ones who are actually out there interacting with everybody else, where everybody else was shut down. They're an essential service. They had to be out there. And so they are step number one for us in saying, how are we going to provide great customer service? And we provide numerous opportunities to hear from them on how to do better.
And when you say opportunities to do better, what sort of opportunities do you give them to do better, or to voice their opinions about how to improve things?
Sure. So there's a number of tasks that we hold the general managers to. Those tasks are a level of employee engagement. And twice a year, we actually grade our general managers, and we have an engagement survey where they go out, 100% of the employees participate in that survey, it's kind of an expectation, whether it's union or not, that they fill out the surveys. And those surveys give us an opportunity to get some insight, whether it's actionable items that they come up as because they put down comments, or it's actual items that come out of how they grade the overall service that's being provided them for our company. At the end of the year, the general manager is held accountable. I'm held accountable to how well our employees are engaged and how we score on those engagement scores. So we just finished one 2 weeks ago, I think it was. And so we're sifting through that data and we're finding out what our team members have said. Now, I think that's just the clinical portion of it, but the expectation is also that our supervisors are working with our team members on a daily basis, that they're doing crew outs, they're giving them key information about what to expect, whether it's a weather event or whether it's some kind of new safety standard or protocol. They'll roll those things out. General manager, of course, is having a series, general manager is expected to have a series of roundtables with our employees where they sit down to talk about, hey, what are your issues? And they give them an open mic for that. And so like I said, we pride ourselves in that. It's one of our pillars as a company, but we hold the general managers accountable for making sure that they have an engaged workforce.
What about training? What role does training have in providing successful roll-off services to the general public? There's particular training to the folks who are the boots on the ground, meeting with the customer on a daily basis, your drivers.
Yeah, and during Chad's testimony, he referenced the number of the more specific training details that they get into with our supervisors and our behind the wheel trainers that we have. But training is critical. But training is critical for multiple reasons. It's one is to make sure they know how to do the job, but more importantly, or as importantly, is they know how to do the job safely. Republic puts safety as our number one priority. It has my entire term with the company, and trying to figure out, hey, wait a minute, how do we talk about safety matters with them is part of our training function. And roll-off drivers, it becomes extremely even more critical for them because they're using large equipment and taking it over terrain, especially in rural Montana, where you can get weather changes pretty quickly.
You were here for Mr. Emmons' testimony earlier today?
I was.
And, generally characterizing his testimony, he had testified something to the effect that during his early work with the company, there was a focus on safety, and as time went by, the focus changed more towards numbers. From your perspective, what is your response to that?
Well, first and foremost, I was a little bit disappointed, I have to acknowledge, because that was his feeling. I don't want to detract from his feelings if he thought that was a change. However, I know it's not a change from the company. The company has and continues to emphasize safety. We know that depending on where we're at, that doing this type of work, you're in the top 10 most dangerous jobs in the country. So you can't be focused on safety and have success. You can't not be focused in on safety and have a successful company. We're really proud of the fact that, when we look and we stack ourselves up against the industry, we're 40% better. So that obviously didn't translate to him. And so for that, I take personally, say, hey, wait a minute, something didn't translate to him. He didn't feel that, but he should have. There would have been plenty of opportunities for him to do that. And it's potentially a missed opportunity that we had there, but it's not because the company wasn't focused on safety. We have safety stand downs regularly whenever there's any problems that come up. We've had a very strong initiative in the last year to eliminate backing. And Eastern Montana has done a great job in trying to eliminate the ability to back, because we know that's one of the most prime opportunities to have an accident when you're backing up, whether that's a collection vehicle or a roll-off vehicle, whatever it is. And so from our CEO all the way down, we start with safety, we end with safety in every one of our meetings. And so, like I said, it was disappointing to hear, because that's the way he felt, and I don't want to discredit that, but that is not the culture of the company.
I want to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the differences between serving urban customers as compared to rural customers, okay? And when providing roll-off services, is there a difference in providing those roll-off services to an urban customer as compared to a rural customer?
Well, I want to emphasize something that's been said a couple of times, and it's kind of, I don't believe it's just Republic's view. I believe it's everybody's view about what, a permit is, right? I believe a permit's not just a right to provide service, it's a responsibility to provide service. Which means if you're in an urban environment, you provide service. If you're in a rural environment, you have to provide service. Now, overall, the finances have to work really well there, but in the end, it has to be something that says, hey, wait a minute, how do we provide services to everybody within the territory that we have? Once you limit the amount of territory that you're asking for a permit, when Chad was referencing, we have the one permit number with all of the subtitles. Those are all smaller geographic areas that were bit off over years. So when Republic looks at these permitted areas, we look at it as that responsibility. And so we look at it from the standpoint of saying, wait a minute, we have to provide rural, we have to provide urban. We can't just decide, hey, wait, we're gonna make more money on this route versus that route. There's gonna be a difference. And I think, that kind of process, as we look at the totality of the business unit and how well it's doing, we know there's some synergies that's created that benefits the rural areas because of the urban areas.
And so, I appreciate that. And so, are there different costs involved in operating in rural areas as opposed to more densely populated urban areas like the city of Billings, for example?
Absolutely. I mean, when you're breaking down a cost of doing service, you're always putting it into a minute, right? Saying, hey, how many hours is it gonna take you to get out to service that customer? How much to get back? How much do you have to dump, the material? How much you're gonna be at the landfill? So you take into account all of those calculations, and then you figure out saying, okay, wait a minute, do I have the assets too, right? Because the fixed asset becomes really important, especially when you're talking about a rural or an urban area. The rural areas benefit from the fact that, we have a lot of fixed assets that get spread out amongst the two, that can keep our costs a little bit lower in the rural areas, because the urban areas tend to be bigger and you have more work there. So when you're calculating the expense or that what you're gonna charge for any service, that's all taken into account. However, I would say that, the rural areas do benefit from having somebody who provides service to the whole area, because your fixed assets get spread out over a larger.
In terms of profitability, is it easier to operate in a more densely populated area as opposed to a farther spread out rural area?
Assuming somebody's doing it correctly, then yes, it's always gonna be easier in a more urban area, because you can get more turns in a day. Right, if I'm gonna go 10 minutes down the road, I'm gonna pick up a container, move that. If I can get 20 of those, then I can spread the cost over those. If I'm gonna go 2 hours down, if I'm gonna head to Red Lodge or Tim, if I'm gonna go that far, then yeah, there are gonna be, some inefficiencies associated with having that driver there. Because the driver, think about the driver aspect of it. If they gotta go this far, they gotta go 2 hours to pick up a container. The driver's expense is what it is in that 10-hour day. And if I can get more customers in there, then it obviously makes sense that that driver's expense gets spread out over a bigger group. And so that can be, beneficial.
And generally speaking, do the profits earned from the more centralized urban areas, are those used to kind of alleviate the additional costs incurred with traveling to farther locations in rural areas, for example, going up to Rite Aid, things like that?
Well, that's where I get back to where I was talking about the fixed assets. They definitely provide us an opportunity to get to some of the more rural areas, because we have our fixed costs that get spread out. So the urban areas do, in some ways, I don't like to use the word subsidize, but they do. It's how you'd say it's the urban areas tend to subsidize the rural areas, because we don't have to go out and buy a container to service that rural customer. We have that container or that truck or that driver or however that services whatever we can get. And our expectation on the area level is that Chad's using his team to their full extent to get as many of those customers out and services as they possibly can, because that's kind of how we make money.
And in your experience, have you seen instances where a smaller startup competitor comes into the market and receives a Class C certificate and the effects that that can have on Republic?
Yes,
And generally, what has been your experience and what have you seen happen when that happens?
I've seen it done successfully and I've seen it done not successfully, right? And usually the times that it's not successful, it ends up being, you know, the important thing, and I think Chad was really relating this, the permits have value in and of themselves. And that value is important to somebody somewhere. They're gonna pay for that permit, so there's value. So if you get a small hauler that comes in and they fail on their service and their ability, then any prudent business isn't gonna want a permit to sit out there and just lapse. It's just not there. You're gonna acquire that permit, and you may allow that permit to go away and be subsumed. Well, that cost gets borne somewhere, right? And so that cost gets put into our rate making as we try to figure out what rates we're gonna charge throughout the various areas. And then, and so the rate base ends up paying for that problem. They also pay for it in terms of the service related to it, because if a small hauler can't provide the level of service because they don't have a good business plan, and that was what one of the models are that we're facing. They have a good business plan where they say, well, how are you going to service these customers? Are you gonna go up to their door to get the service, or are you gonna pick the service up at the end of their driveway? That kind of distinction, right, creates animosity and angst amongst customers, because then it goes, well, wait a minute, they used to do it this way and now you do it this way. And that's all based upon, hey, wait a minute, how do these different service providers work? So a failed permit is by no stretch a good thing for the community.
And in your experience, when there's a new hauler that enters the market, who are the types of customers that the hauler would focus on?
Well, typically, in almost every case, whether it's been a successful permit or not, it starts with, hey, this is my friend, this is my brother, this is my, second cousins, whatever. But people, you're gonna go door to door, you're gonna say, hey, wait a minute, I'm gonna provide service to the people I know, and that's where it starts, right? And then you're gonna get into some issues where, you may have somebody who says, well, I really got a problem with that service, right? And so they may step into that realm, but first of all, they gotta figure out the service levels they have to deal with those first round of, hey, that's the earlier group that you kind of know. They typically aren't gonna be the more rural because they may not know them, especially if they're urban. And when you say, hey, I'm gonna service the first one, that knocks on the door, it's gonna be somebody that's really close to you. That's gonna be that typically is gonna be more the urban areas.
And when you see that focus on newer companies entering the market, focusing on the more urban areas, what impact does that have on the urban customers, if any?
It depends on the market and where how much pent-up demand there is. You'll see some competition there that, you may see an initial decline in some of the rates. That, decline typically goes away in my experience that I've seen where they come in, where you might see a small gap, you might see a small interruption in the rates, and then that goes away over a short period of time. Things normalize out in terms of the rates, and there's really no rate advantage. There is a misconception that unlimited competition, and I can say that when I was just in Denver, where you can, look at a market there where they have unfettered competition there, rates are higher. Because you lose the efficiencies associated with all the economies of scale of saying, hey, wait a minute, how do I get, to these roll-off areas or customers? If I have a smaller pool of customers that I'm working with, that I have to push my fixed assets onto, well, then those rates are gonna be higher for those. In a subscription market like they do in Colorado, it is literally where you might see, and one of the worst case scenarios is where they have 7 competitors going down one roadway. And the rates there are higher than they are anywhere else.
What about the effect, maybe I didn't ask this correctly, but what about the effect of when there is a new hauler who enters the market, who's focusing on the more urban areas? What impact, if any, does that have on the rural customer?
So typically, you'll see an increase in that rural customer, because there will be a dilution of that higher profitable work in the urban areas. So the rural areas all of a sudden have to make up for that, because typically companies are gonna, they pull things together, right? Any company would do that, they're not gonna say, you know, they may individually say, am I making a little bit on this account, and this account, and this account? But in the end of the day, they're gonna look at it in totality and say, hey, this meeting the returns that I'm hoping for. And so what you could see is a less likelihood of people saying, well, I don't wanna go out there and collect on that rural, so there may be less availability. Because people will say, well, I'm gonna fill it all up in here. And then you may see those rural customers having a price increase as a result of that.
We'll talk a little bit about competition. In this instance, if a customer in the Billings area is not satisfied with the services that Republic is providing, what other options does that customer have?
Well, one of the misconceptions is that, you know, if we're the only ones in a service territory, this misconception is there's no competition. I think, you know, you heard from a number of the people who testified with some of the shipping that they had choices, they had options. They talked about, well, I just didn't want to deal with the hassle, so I paid for it myself. So when we look at what our rates should be and the convenience we're doing, it's a service. We need to charge for that service. There's always competition for us because we know in this market that customers can always do it themselves. And if they get frustrated with us, we know they'll, you know, in this market's a little different because they can run to McKenzie, they can run to the city, or they can do it themselves. And that's where we've heard a lot of people say, well, I haven't used them for 5 years. That's unfortunate. We want them to be our customers, and we don't want them because they're in effect competing with us. Now, they say it's inconvenient for them to do it, but obviously they found a cost benefit analysis in their own models to do it themselves. That's always a level of competition that we're going after.
You talked a little bit about how Republic views the certificate in this case. Why does Republic view the certificate of public convenience and necessity as a privilege?
Well, I mean, right, responsibility, right?
Privilege and responsibility. Why?
Privilege and responsibility. So, you know, obviously it's a privilege because we were allowed the opportunity to service the communities, and we're allowed to do it in a way that we should be making money. There's no question about that. And you know, that is something we take. Customer zeal is not something that we take for granted. We have a program, it's called I think Chad may have said NPS, but what that is Net Promoter Score, that we evaluate on each of the areas, each of the business units that we have. We evaluate how those customers view us. And once again, we hold our general managers accountable to that to say, hey, wait a minute, what's your Net Promoter Score that we have for there? And so when we say, you know, it's a privilege, it's some of our fundamentals. We know that if we come into the area, we're not going to shy away from the fact that we're a for-profit company and we are hoping to make money on that. We're a very competitive company too. We're competitive throughout the country. But in this market, because of the way the permit system was established, and that permit system, my experience has always been to say, wait a minute, how do we make sure that Montana is provided service, both rural and urban? So that's where we take as a responsibility as well, and to say that's how Montana has decided to make sure that they have services for all of Montana, not just pieces of it.
Can I ask for a clarification? Is NPS per job?
It's Net Promoter Score that we have for per business unit, but we do have it broken down into, so we'll get an NPS score for our residential customers, for our small container customers, commercial customers, and our industrial customers. We evaluate those and it gets rolled up into one NPS.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jim, there were some insinuations in some of the testimony about concerns for retaliation if certain witnesses would testify. What is your viewpoint on what type of company Republic is and if Republic would ever engage in some sort of retaliation?
No, and that's where some of our checks and balances are, right? We look at those things very closely. That's why we have some oversight from the area as well as our headquarters. Our headquarters will review those things. Our CEO, John Bender, he can get complaints from anybody, and he does. Gets complaints from people if they thought there was any kind of concerns with that, and he brings it down to the business unit. He gets his hands dirty to make sure that he's talking to people. If there is any sense of that, I believe that we have enough checks and balances through our headquarters, through our area, and through our business unit, that would not be tolerated. That's not a standard. One of the things that Republic really prides itself in is that we get judged by national firms. We're the second largest. Sorry, Chair, I heard you say third, the other. No, we're number two. But that, so we're the second largest in the country. And so for us, it becomes really critical, number one, that we have a workforce that we care about. That's why we get very proud of the fact that we've been rated as, one of the 100 best companies to work for in Forbes. And it's also why we also get other groups that base, their rankings on ethical. We've been rated as one of the top ethical companies in the country for 7 years running, and we're proud of that. And so we, once again, on that checks and balances, we look at it from the headquarters all the way down to the bottom level, and we look at it from the bottom level up to say we can't become that ethical company that we want to be if we would allow something like that. And trust me, I sat there through a number of hearings where I've heard people say, things and it makes me grumpy, and I understand the grumpiness about it and the disappointment, but retaliation is zero tolerance.
Thank you for your testimony, Jim. I have no further questions at this time for you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Singer?
I have no questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like we've met before, but I can't seem to find any prior testimony. And
We've met in a number of these hearings.
okay, perfect. Can you tell me, you indicated during your testimony that you've been part of some successful permit applications. Is that correct?
When I say part of, I've seen successful permit applications be successful.
And are you referring to permit applications in this state, the state of Montana, or?
Yes.
Which ones?
I was involved in the first LML hearing, the second LML hearing, the third LML hearing, and then I've been involved in a couple that are over here on the east area that weren't as successful. I'll tell you who they are, but I would rather not.
You indicated during your testimony, and I just wanted to get clarification on this because I think I may have missed a piece of this, but you said something about being 40% better than your competitors?
40% better than the industry average in terms of safety.
Oh, okay. There we go. Do you think, is it normal for a business, or a business like Republic, if one stream of your revenue makes up about 5 to 6% of the total revenue compared to another stream making up the bulk 94, 95%? Is it normal for the business to be a little bit more focused on making sure that whatever revenue stream is making up that larger chunk is the focus of the business?
Well, I think I know the question you're asking. I'm trying to get it. I'm sorry.
No, and I'll withdraw that question. It wasn't a good one. It's been a long couple days. So 94 to 95% of revenue generated in the proposed service area that we're talking about is residential and commercial service. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay. And so 5 to 6% of Republic's revenue in the area is then that roll off or large consumer service. Is that fair?
Now, when you Understand my area is different, so when you're talking about the business unit, yes,
I'm talking
checks.
about what we're talking about.
Correct,
Right, okay. And so Republic would be remiss to focus more on this 5 to 6% stream of revenue, than it would be to focus on the larger residential commercial service side of things, right?
Not necessarily, because I mean, it depends on our overall goals that we have. As I mentioned, when we look at our contracts and I kind of use the perform as the example, but when we do our reviews, our financial reviews, we look at each line of business and we determine how is each line of business doing, including porta potties. And porta potties are a very small portion of our work, but we look at, hey, wait a minute, is that portion being as successful as it can be, with the understanding that, there's gonna be limits. Recycling is a great example on that, where we strive as a company overall to improve and enhance recycling. We have a goal that by 2030, we will increase the amount of recycling materials that we control by 40%. And that's not necessarily our most successful or profitable piece of business, but we spend a lot of time focusing on it.
Mr. Rushing, do you have any idea do you have any idea of the amount of expense or percentage of expenses go towards residential and commercial versus the roll-off service that Republic provides in the proposed service area?
Not off the top of my head, no idea.
Do you think it's more for the residential and commercial or higher for the roll-off services, the expenses?
Well, the overall expenses, I could speculate, but that's all I could do.
Go ahead.
I could speculate that, yeah.
I'll object to speculation, Your Honor.
I'll withdraw the question.
Mr. Chair.
Question then withdrawn.
You did testify that, and I recognize that you were has Republic produced anything in this hearing to document or demonstrate that that's actually the case here? Other than your testimony?
Not that I'm worried.
Okay. You indicated during your testimony that you've seen unsuccessful competitors enter the market and successful competitors enter the market. Is that fair to say? Can you tell me, or give me an example of an unsuccessful competitor that's entered the market here in Montana?
Well, that's what I was trying to avoid earlier. Yes, I mean, we had one here in Bull Mountain.
Okay. And was that the early 90s or was that, how long ago was that?
No, we just acquired their permit this year.
And
that was I use that as an example because it was a company that came in with not a very good business plan. They were out there, they got a number of customers, we had to transfer those customers over, and we ended up having to acquire the permit and then allow it to lapse. Regrettably, at the expense of the overall permit holders, because they wanted to sell, they wanted to get out of business because they didn't have a good sense of what they were doing.
what was the,
Clarification, was that commercial roll-off business or was that residential?
I would have to confer with others to specific, I believe it was all, but I'm not positive about that.
Thank you.
and what did Republic pay to acquire Bull Mountain's permit?
I do not have that information off the top of my head. I don't have that information.
Who would have that information?
Our mergers and acquisition team, and they typically we don't publish that because it's a private partnership or a private agreement.
Does that sale and transfer get approved by the commission?
Only the transfer permit, or we didn't transfer the permit, we just asked for it to be dissolved.
So Republic eliminated the competition in that case.
Objection, argumentative. She is arguing facts that have not been established in the record
I'm asking a question.
with the argument inherent in the question.
I think she was just asking what happened to that, so that other company got dissolved. I think is what the witness said. is that they didn't want to be in business any longer.
They sold their business.
Yeah, they sold their business to you. Okay.
Where was that? I'm sorry, you could.
No, please.
Where was, do you recall the proposed service area for Bull Mountain or the service area that Bull Mountain, their permit was for?
I do not.
Is it in the eastern part of the state or the western part? Eastern part of the state. Okay. Do you know if there were other competitors in that area of the state? Besides,
I don't have that information.
okay, besides Republic, you don't know if there were any other ones?
I cannot remember the exact geography of the areas.
Okay. So that's an unsuccessful competitor, this Bull Mountain. Do you know when they got their permit approved by the Public Service Commission?
I can only say that they had their permit for like less than 5 years.
And can you give me an example of a successful competitor?
Well, I mean, we know that L&L's been in Bozeman for some time now. They initiated their proposal and have been there for more than my 12 years here with Republic.
And would it surprise you to learn that L&L started out with a construction and debris hauling permit? before the
Objection.
Public Service Commission?
Those facts have not been introduced into evidence.
I'm just asking if you would be surprised to learn that.
I think that's fits the format that Council for Republic has been asking questions.
Right, wouldn't be surprised.
You indicated, and I think maybe this was just in passing, that the city of Denver has unfettered competition with its waste haulers.
Not the city of Denver, I said Denver, and then I clarified as Colorado tends to have some. City of Denver provides its own service.
Are haulers in the city of Denver required to have a license, or do you know?
It varies, but yeah, you have to have a license. From city to city.
And you indicated that rates are higher in Denver. Are we talking about roll-off or construction debris rates or residential, commercial, or all of them, or what's your opinion there?
It's my opinion that they're all typically higher.
If empty roll-offs is successful in getting their certificate of public convenience and necessity, based on your testimony that I'll withdraw that question. If empty roll-offs is successful in getting their certificate of public convenience and necessity, will Republic raise rates for its rural customers in the proposed service area?
I can't tell you that right now. I don't know what. I have no information on how they're going to run their business, so until we know what they do.
I have no further questions for this ordinance.
Thank you. Commissioner attorneys, any questions? Commissioner Brown?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Tukacek, any questions?
No question, sir.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions, sir. You talked about the urban versus rural, spreading out the costs. I think testimony earlier indicated that a cost on a job had to do with distance and weight and a whole bunch of other things. So, I mean, am I understanding this correctly, that if somebody was to go to Roundup and do a job, that it would be priced the same, the mileage wouldn't be an increased factor, and it'd be the same cost as something locally?
Well, you have two elements of any cost. You have your fixed cost, your variable costs.
Yeah.
So the variable cost would increase as a result of mileage and everything else. But the fixed cost associated with that would either have to be borne by a larger group or a smaller group.
And then your understanding, I appreciate the corporate understanding that having a permit it is regarded as a requirement to handle all points, but it seems to me that it's not a requirement, but it's a permission to operate within that area, but there's no legal requirement, is that, or are you under?
It is our understanding that when we hire a permit, and this is why Chad, I think, was emphasizing earlier, that we don't refuse service to anybody, is that part of our permit is that we get the permit to provide service. In the past, these permits were designed to be exclusive, and they were designed to be exclusive because, and this is common with other models in other states, because the expectation is that we would provide service to everybody within that area. And that's how we've always viewed the permits.
Thank you, those are questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think. Thank you.
No further questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, are we, everyone through this witness? Okay, then I see no reason to make it other than a permanent excusal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Mr. Singer, as I understand, you needed to call a couple witnesses at 4 o'clock, is that correct?
Thank you for remembering that, Mr. Chairman. In fact, that has changed. One of them is available tomorrow and the other one we won't call. So there's no out of order this afternoon.
Very good, thank you so much. You may proceed with your next witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next witness is Henrietta Barnhart Ness, and I believe she's joining us remotely. Can you confirm whether or not she's on? And if not, I can prompt her. I know she was planning on joining between 2 and 3, but
she's not on yet.
not on yet. If the commission would permit, I'll give her a quick call, and I'm sure she can join us. Thank you.
You'll be off the record until that, about 5 minutes until that's done. Thank you.
Okay, I can see the courtroom. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
He's got his cookie.
Cookie crisp. Very good. We are back in the record. We have established communications with this next witness. What happens to this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Republic calls Henrietta Barnhart Ness.
You hear us, Ms. Ness?
Yeah,
Thank you. So I take it you were not sworn yesterday?
can you say that again?
Were you sworn in yesterday?
No.
Okay, will you please stand? Raise your right hand. Do you promise to tell the whole truth in this matter, the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Correct.
Thank you. May I proceed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Henrietta. Can you state and spell your name for the record, please?
Yeah, it's Henrietta Barnhart Ness. It's HENRIETTABARNHART-NESS.
Henrietta, where do you live?
And Billings. Montana.
Thank you. And how long have you lived in Billings?
Probably a little over 5 years.
And what do you do for work?
I work at a fiber optic company,
Okay, what's the name of the company you work for?
JKL Associates.
And where is JKL Associates headquartered?
Sorry. Go grab them.
Repeat the question.
Henrietta, where is JKL Associates headquartered?
Billings, Montana.
Wonderful. And I think I heard you say fiber optic company. What kind of work does JKL Associates do?
We basically, dig underground and put pipe and fiber underneath.
Okay, so fair to say like a utility construction service?
Yes.
Okay. How long have you worked for JKL?
5 years.
5 years, so the whole time you've been in Billings?
Yep.
And what's your role in the business?
I'm the office manager. I pay the bills. I call for roll-offs for all the jobs that we have.
Terrific. And how many, if you had a rough estimate, how many employees does JKL Associates have?
Depends on like the summertime, but 80, I would say.
Okay, so quite a number. And during let's say start with the summertime. During the summertime, if you had to give some sort of estimate or average, how many jobs would the company be doing at any one point in time?
Probably 4 to 6.
4 to 6. And in the winter season, I think I understood maybe less employees during that period of time?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, and during the winter season, then how many jobs at any given point in time?
Probably 3 to 4.
3 to 4. Okay, so between 3 and 6 jobs at any one point in time over the course of the year.
Yes.
Where does JKL Associates perform most of its construction projects?
We're kind of all over, Billings, Muscle Shell, Big Timber, Martinsdale.
Okay. Go on, I'm not trying to cut you off, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, and then we have jobs, outside of the state too, so.
Sure. So I'm just gonna run through 5 counties and confirm, does JKL Associates ever do work in, I think I heard you say Yellowstone County?
Correct.
Okay, Stillwater County,
Yes.
Carbon County,
Yes,
Muscle Shell County,
yes,
and Golden Valley County?
yes.
And generally speaking, when JKL Associates is working in these 5 counties, or any of these 5 counties, how does it dispose of its construction waste and debris from the job site?
We order a roll-off that
Okay.
put all of our stuff in.
Is there a particular company that JKL Associates typically works for, or works with as to garbage, construction waste and debris disposal?
Yes, Republic,
Okay, and do you use Republic for all of your job sites?
yes.
Who from JKL is typically communicating with Republic?
Myself.
When you need to communicate a need for roll-off services, then how do you do that?
Well, I used to call like a 1-800 number. Now I have a business card for Jerry that gets me all lined out.
Okay, and so at some point you began by working through the 1-800 number, and received Jerry's contact information?
Yep.
Okay, and what is Jerry's role to the extent you were aware?
She is a construction solutions, or she's a construction account manager.
Construction account manager, okay. So when you have a particular project, or JKL, like I'm saying, when it has a particular project, you would submit the request for a roll-off to Jerry, is that accurate?
Yep.
How about pickup when the roll-off is full, how does that work?
I would just call her and give her the location of where the roll-off is, and then she schedules pickup.
Okay, other than calling, do you ever use a text to communicate with her?
No, I normally just call her. I mean, I can text her, I have her number, but I just normally pick up the phone and just give her a call.
Sure, understood. And is she pretty responsive when you call?
Yeah, if she doesn't answer, she calls me probably 10-15 minutes after I call, so.
Okay, that's pretty good. How long, to the extent you're aware, I understand you've been there for 5 years, but to the extent you're aware, how long has JKL used Republic for its construction waste disposal services?
I think way back since 2006.
Okay. How would you describe, since you've been at JKL, how would you describe your experience working with Republic?
I think fine, they make my job easy. I mean, I just pick up the phone, make a phone call, and they, get everything wherever we need a roll off, whatever size we need, they get it to the location we need it. And then when I need it dumped, I just make a phone call and they dump it.
Okay. Would it be fair to say that Republic is responsive to your requests?
Yes.
Okay. Other than perhaps occasional short delays, has JKL ever had to wait for service?
No, it's been pretty, I mean, I guess maybe one time when they had an employee that was sick and then they just schedule us the next day.
Okay. Has there ever been an instance where you had to wait, beyond 48 or 72 hours for service?
No.
Okay. How would you rate, if you were gonna rate Republic services, 1 being awful and 10 being terrific, how would you rate Republic's services?
I would say probably 9, because everything that we're needing, they're doing just great.
Have you ever had to complain to anyone at Republic about their services?
Nope.
Are there, I guess conversely, are there any instances where you recall particularly good customer service from Republic?
I think Jerry, I think she's amazing. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, I can call her at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and she gets right on it, so I would say she's amazing.
Okay. Outside of your work with JKL, have you had any other experiences with Republic?
I haven't.
Okay, and in whether with JKL or otherwise, have you had any experience working with other construction waste and debris haulers?
I haven't.
Okay. Just sort of as a yes or no, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with the services provided by Republic?
I'm satisfied.
And based on your experiences thus far, does Republic meet JKL Associates' needs for construction waste disposal?
Absolutely, or we'd find a different supplier.
Thank you, Henriette. I have nothing else for you.
Thank you.
And then pause one moment, I'm sure there's some other questions there.
Okay.
So. No questions. No questions. Ms. Garrett?
Hi, Henrietta. My name is Alan Giro, and I represent the applicants receiving MT roll-offs. May I call you Henrietta? Is that okay? Or?
Yep. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. You indicated that before you got Jerry's contact information, that you had to call the 1-800 number for Republic. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Was your experience different with the 1-800 number versus Jerry, or was it about the same?
No, I believe it was the same. It's just that Jerry stopped in and gave us a card and we started using that.
And you said that Jerry's a construction account manager, is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. And does JKL have an account with Republic?
Yes.
Okay. Is there a customer service agreement that governs that account?
You know, when we have roll-offs sent out to different jobs, we do have to sign off on, that it's getting put on or where it's being placed.
Henrietta, based on your positive experience with Republic, would you say that because Republic provides JKL with good service, that no other business should be allowed to compete with them to offer such services?
Chairman, excuse me, I have to object. That's beyond the scope of direct testimony. Direct examination, excuse me.
She said during her testimony that she would, if they weren't meeting her needs, she would get service from somebody else.
Answer your objection?
I would maintain the objection, but I understand what you're asking, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'll overrule the objection then. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Henrietta, because you've had a positive experience with Republic, do you think that justifies keeping other competitors from entering the market to offer the same services?
No,
Go ahead.
I was just saying, yeah, I mean, I don't feel like if there's other competition out there that they're not able to join the market or whatever.
I have no further questions. Thank you, Henrietta.
Thank you.
Commissioner Attorneys, any questions? Commissioner Brown? Commissioner Bubachek, any questions for this witness?
No questions.
Thank you. I have no questions. Thank you for your testimony. And is there any further witness? Okay, at this point, thank you for your testimony. You are permanently excused. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Nicholson or?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have one final witness, but he unfortunately has a medical appointment this afternoon and is unable to testify until tomorrow morning. So we have no further witnesses this afternoon. We'd like to have him called early tomorrow before we rest our case.
All right, and Mr. Singer, you're not ready to initiate your case until tomorrow morning, is that correct?
Well, we can start whenever you want.
Well, that's fine, we just want to make sure we use the time productively on there. Do we need a 10-minute break right now? We had a 5-minute one earlier. I don't see anything, so you may proceed with your case in chief.
Well, I'm going to offer an opening statement if I could first.
But of course.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, President Brown, Commissioner Budget. I'm not gonna go through the elements that have already been reviewed with you. And our position is fairly simple. Those elements haven't been met, and to the extent that they have been met, they will be rebutted or have been rebutted by the testimony that's offered by Republic and that we'll present here in our case in chief. Thus far, and in the rest of the hearing, the commission has heard no data that talks about a demand for these services. There's no evidence in the record, and there will be none, that shows that there's an unmet need out there. What we have are anecdotes. And one of my favorite sayings is, an anecdote is not data. It's just a story, it's just one story. We've got competing stories here, and there will be more competing stories. The closest we're going to get to data in this case is that McKinsey will be offering more anecdotes than anyone else. So we'll have 4 stories for you compared to what others can offer. And that's simply to illustrate that nobody satisfies every customer every time. That can't be the measure of is the need being met. Things happen, and this is a business that has some seasonality to it that's been talked about and will be talked about more. And the applicant is proposing to do this business with just construction waste and debris. So the other providers of this same kind of service provide it to many more types of entities than construction operations. And that gives them a year-round stability that the applicant isn't proposing to have. And that's an important issue here in terms of, are they going to be able to survive? Because they not only have to prove the need, they have to prove that it's not being met, but they have to prove that they can meet that need. And that they can do it in a way that's not going to damage the competitors. And we will offer testimony to confirm what the last witness talked about in terms of the damage that occurs to the public when an applicant succeeds and then is unable to perform, and that's not good. The commission operates in an interesting area. Garbage hauling is kind of like a utility. There's a reason that the state allows gas providers and electric providers to operate in a semi-monopoly situation in certain parts of the state, where to get gas to compete with electric, but not to compete with many others. There's a reason that cities provide water through a unified system. It's economies of scale. It's the only efficient way to do it in that kind of thing. I'm in favor of competition, as I think anybody in this room, but there are limits to where competition makes sense. And there is sufficient competition in this market, we will show, to restrain prices, to provide good service, motivate providers to provide good service to customers, while keeping those companies healthy so that they can make the investments and ensure that that service will continue and not be interrupted. That's what we will be presenting in the next few hours of this hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our first witness is Brandon Sandback.
Mr. Sandback, so you were here yesterday.
I was.
Right,
Yes.
thank you.
Ready for this?
Sure, I'm ready to go.
Good. What's your name?
My name is Brandon Sandback, BRANDON, SANDBAK.
And what's your job?
I'm the general manager for McKenzie Disposal.
How long have you been doing that?
I have been in that position for approximately 9 years.
What did you do before that?
Prior to that, I spent 16 years at the post office as a supervisor for delivery and operations.
And before that?
Before that, I was in the military for 9 years and was a mechanic and a supervisor as well. And I had a little stint in between there where I worked for BFI, which is a former name for Allied and Republic Services.
So you've been around this stuff for a while.
I have, yes.
When you were with the post office, did that generate some garbage?
Oh, absolutely.
So you were involved with the industry even then?
Yeah, in a way, yeah, because we had waste material out on the dock that we had to get rid of all the time, so yes. You're not referring to junk mail, are you? Mr. Chairman, yes, I would be referring to junk mail. I think we all know that. I apologize.
They're not gonna upset me. In 100 words or less, can you describe what your duties are as the general manager of McKenzie?
Probably not in 100 words or less, but I am the general manager for McKenzie Disposal, which is a very broad list of duties. I can tell you that I am a CDL holder. I do have a Class B CDL, so I drive when necessary. I also take care of all the office operations. I'm in charge of payroll. I'm in charge of quarterly taxes. I'm in charge of quarterly reports back to the state. I take care of all the DOT files for all of our drivers. Also updating FMCSA scores. I also am the mechanic when necessary. Coming from a mechanical background, I have a good knowledge, I guess, is the best way to say it, of general mechanics, so I can weld, you name it, I can do it. When necessary, I also assist my route supervisor as far as setting up new routes and ensuring that we can get all of our customers serviced. So a little bit of everything. I wear very many hats, and obviously I need to, so.
So, is McKenzie an operation like Republic or not?
We are similar in that we pick up garbage, okay? And we do provide that garbage service to customers in a similar service area. Republic obviously is a national company, a corporation. We are smaller. We are just operating as basically, as you said, a mom and pop shop. So that's kind of how our setup is. We compete with Republic Services and also the city of Billings, which is what kind of regulates our pricing. So obviously we have to, in order to stay in business, we have to be able to function in their kind of price ranges, okay?
We'll get to that.
To be similar to Republic, no. Operationally, we have the same issues that Republic Services does. Okay,
But organizationally, you're different.
Correct. Yeah.
Is the owner of your business in the room?
Yes, the owner is in the room.
Who is it?
That would be Charmaine Johnston. She is the president and secretary of our company.
And you mentioned permit area. So let's take a look. Exhibit U, folder in front of you. Page 19. Sure, the pages are numbered, but you know your PSC number, correct?
PSC number is 9265.
Language of your permit shows up on exhibit U there. And so what does your permit say?
Our permit is a sub A class D. We have authorization to haul ashes, trash, waste, refuse
rubbish and garbage in the city of Billings, Montana, and between Billings, Montana, and other points. Carrier is allowed to transport authorized commodities to certified landfills from territory authorized. Our limitation on our permit is transportation must originate or terminate in Billings, Montana.
And so as a practical matter, what does that mean?
In a practical matter, what that means is we are limited to hauling back to the city of Billings landfill. Okay, so we can't haul to the Hardin landfill, we can't go to Great Falls, we can't go to Missoula. So our limitation is we can only bring in garbage to the city of Billings landfill, and that limits us to what the city of Billings landfill will accept. And their acceptance areas are Carbon, Stillwater, Muscle Shell, Yellowstone. And then we have the city of Big Timber and the town of Pryor that are in that service area. So those are the only areas that we can haul out of.
And that's a limitation, it's a result of what the city landfill will accept.
Correct.
And city land, Billings landfill, how about the hazardous materials, do they accept those?
The city of Billings landfill will make special exceptions for asbestos, but I don't have any drivers qualified to haul asbestos, Tom.
So compared to the area that's being proposed by empty roll-offs, how is McKenzie service area different?
We will be competing for the same areas with the exception of Golden Valley County. Since the city of Billings landfill does not accept Golden Valley, we will not be able to compete in that area with them.
And so now let's turn to this subject of construction, waste and debris, which is the focus of this particular application that's before the commission now. How big a part of McKenzie's business is roll-off construction debris?
The roll-off construction debris business for McKenzie disposal is probably approximately a third, I would say, probably of our business. We have 3 operations that we run, and it's fairly important to us.
And what 3 operations do you run?
We have residential service, we have commercial service, which would be the dumpster service, the 2 through 8 yard service, and then we also have our construction and debris, demolition and the roll-off service. So it's basically, we have different sizes of roll-off containers. So we have everywhere from a 15-yard box all the way up to a 40-yard box. We limit our 40-yard boxes basically to a contract we have with the town of Columbus. So everything under that, under those 4 40-yard boxes we have is everything is either a 30, a 20, or 50.
Now, off the top of your head, do you know how many boxes, industrial boxes you did?
I read what you sent me, Tom. No, we have 222 boxes is what we have, Tom.
All right. So I want to focus first on one of the primary contested issues in this case, which is there a public need for the service that empty roll-offs proposes to provide? And I'm going to ask it in 2 ways because there's some ambiguity here about exactly what they're proposing. Is there a need, in your opinion, for construction roll-off services provided by a company with 1 truck and 14 containers?
To say there's a need is a difficult question to answer. What I would say is it's going to be difficult for McKenzie to be able to succeed as a business if somebody gets another permit in our area. With the plain and simple fact that if they do get a permit, and let's say they do start with 1 truck and they start with 4 boxes, which is what they have, or they have 10 boxes. Okay, it's not gonna limit them from saying, okay, well, now we're gonna go to 5 trucks and 100 boxes. Or it may be 500 boxes like they have proposed in their testimony. So I mean, if that's the case, with us being the size of company that we are, then that could definitely hurt our business.
So, and I'm trying to focus on a little different question, maybe I didn't ask it very well. If there was a need, well, is McKenzie routinely adding containers to its fleet?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So is there a need for somebody else to come in and add 14 containers to the inventory that's available from the current providers?
I would say no.
Just because it's already being done.
Correct.
On the other hand, if empty roll-off succeeds to the extent that they've talked about, is there enough demand in this service area to make use of, say, 50 boxes that aren't currently being provided by the providers that are out there? Is there a need for 50 more boxes that are already available?
Tom, I can't say if there's a need or not. What I can say is I know that our business is seasonal on our roll-off containers. And I have gone from 179, I think, when this proceeding started, and now we're at 222 boxes. And I've had up to 40 boxes sitting in our yard when the weather was cold, nasty. So another 50 boxes is not gonna be an easy thing to deal with.
Is there a need for McKenzie as a business to find some balance between inventory and demand?
Yes.
Are you gonna be able to meet the demand at all times?
I don't think any provider out there can meet the demand at all times.
Should they even try?
That would be up to their business plan and see if they can make that happen.
It's gonna be an expensive proposition. Yeah. The second issue that's before the commission is whether the current providers, Republic, City of Billings, and McKenzie, are able and willing to fill the public need that MT Roll-Offs proposes to provide. Is McKenzie willing to do its part and able to do its part to meet that need?
Absolutely.
And explain to the commission how you do that, how McKenzie does that.
The way we do that is obviously by acquiring more assets. Whether it be employees, whether it be equipment, whether it be trucks. I mean, that's the only way you can grow your business. Obviously, you have to adapt and grow with the changing requirements of it. And as Republic said in theirs, Mr. Bauer said that, you know, we feel that that permit is our privilege, basically in our requirement to provide service. And in order for us to keep being able to provide service, we have to expand and we have to acquire more assets and more employees, new trucks. That's just the way you have to do business, and you have to meet those requirements in order to maintain our permit.
You talked about new trucks. The number that McKenzie owned changed while this application's been pending. Why?
Actually, because we had 2 trucks down. And I mean, I've been a mechanic most of my life, so I mean, I know mechanical equipment breaks, okay? So we had 2 trucks down at one time, and I take that back, I had 3 trucks down at one time. I had 7 roll-off trucks total, okay? Now, I had 6, and I had 3 of those down. And I still had customers that needed service, I had contracts that needed to be met. So we bought another truck. We brought it in, and now I have another truck and I have another driver as well.
And did it cost $250,000?
$264,780.
Pretty close. Huh?
Yep.
You mentioned a little bit earlier, you talked about pricing, so let's talk about pricing just a little bit. How does McKenzie go about determining prices?
Are we talking for roll-off service, Tom?
Yes, let's focus on construction roll-off.
Okay, so when we look at pricing as far as our C&D or the roll-off business goes, what we're looking at is a time basically model as well. Okay, because we're gonna look at, for example, a roundup trip, or we're gonna look at a Central Avenue trip. Okay, So it's gonna be based on basically the amount of time. And then we also figure in obviously the cost of the assets and also of the containers, whether it be the drivers, whether it be the trucks, or it be the containers. We're gonna take all that into consideration, and obviously that's what we have to build our model off of.
Okay, and one of the things you didn't mention in that is looking at the prices that are charged by Republic. Do you know what Republic charges?
We do not, I don't price check on them. One thing that we do kind of model our pricing off of is the city of Billings,
And why is it that you're at the city of Billings?
because it's public knowledge. You can look at their resolution that the city of Billings puts out. And then we can go off of what they're charging for local area. And then that way we can kind of model ours off of that.
Does the city of Billings have the same cost structure that you do?
They do not, Tom.
Why not?
City of Billings obviously doesn't have to pay for the landfill for one. Number two, they don't have the taxes that we do. They don't have to be DOT compliant. So there's some differences in there. They don't have to pay the excise tax on the fuel or the tires. There's some differences obviously, so.
But you try to remain competitive with them?
Absolutely, yeah, because we want to stay a viable business too, so we try to model our pricing pretty close to where they're at.
Has McKinsey made efforts to satisfy construction and roll-off customer needs over the last few years, taken initiatives that are a little different than what was done before to try to adjust to the market?
Absolutely.
What kinds of things have you done?
Our adjustments as far as meeting some of those requirements, we have expanded into some of the refineries or one of the refineries. So I have basically myself and three other drivers have been through multiple safety trainings, requirements to keep up with the ever-growing changing area of the refinery in order to be able to provide service for them. Because it's not something, well, we all have background checks. We have what they call as a TWIC card, where basically we have a background check that is cleared by the Department of Homeland Security in order for us to even be able to get into the refinery. So yes, we have expanded many operations and we have tried to adapt to those things that allow us to do business a little bit better, to supply more customers.
So in terms of supplying more customers, have you changed the way that you schedule the operations or offer containers?
We have, Tom, we do have a weekend box operation that we call it, to where we can drop off a box for a customer on a Friday. And then they have it for the weekend and we do not charge rent for the box while they have it for the weekend. And then we just tell them that it has to be picked up on Monday, and that basically gives us a little bit more flexibility to where we can take our 222 boxes, and if we only have a few left in the yard, for what we call a running box. I know, I think it was Mr. Emmons brought it up in his testimony where he talked about how when they run out of boxes, what will happen, and it happens to all of us. They will basically have to go get a full box, take it to landfill and then take it back, making it a 2-trip operation. Basically, so on this weekend box thing, what we can do is take some of those running boxes and provide them for those customers on the weekends. So that way we still get our box back on Monday so we can keep running with that empty box, you see what I mean? And then we also have a temporary box program to where a customer is limited basically to 2 weeks to have that container, okay? And we have a batch of boxes set aside for that now, to where if they need something for less than the 2 weeks, we can give them one of those boxes and get them back. Because I know Republic knows this just as well as I do, but you know, there's a lot of times when these contractors will get a hold of a box and they don't let go of it. Because it happens to where they have it, and they know the difficulty of getting the boxes. They're not dumb, they know what they're doing, so they move it from site to site to site to site, so.
They have to move it from site to
Oh
site.
yeah, of course we move it for them, but it gives them that opportunity to keep that box. as long as they want it, honestly, and when we charge a daily rent for our box, as long as they're paying rent on it, they have it, so.
So you don't have any control over when the box comes back?
Not necessarily, no. The only thing we would have control on that return of that box is that temporary box program.
And that was the reason it was created?
Correct, so that we could free up some boxes so we can provide more for more customers.
Have there been times when Mackenzie could not meet the demand for its roll-off construction service?
Yes.
And for what period of time, and how did you address it?
What we do, when we have run out of boxes, is what we do is we start a waiting list for those customers. And then that list is basically on a first come, first served basis. Okay, so once that name is on the list, then they go on that list. As soon as I have a box available, my office staff will reach out to that customer and let them know that we have a box available if they still need it.
Any idea, estimate of how long people had to wait on that list?
You know, as an estimate, Tom, it's hard to say. Generally speaking, we can get a box out within a week. I'll give it 5 to 7 days. This all comes back to, you know, the fact that since there is a daily rent on the box, I can't project when that box is gonna come back. There could be a day where I'll get 5 boxes back because everybody's done with them. There may be times when I don't get it back for quite a while.
Understood. Does Mackenzie compete with haulers who do not have permits?
Yes, we do.
So explain some of the ways in which that competition occurs.
What we've seen here lately, and obviously some of the contractors that have provided testimony previously have stated that they've gotten their own dump trailers and they have their own operations to where they haul their own garbage, which is, or not garbage, but it could be C&D or garbage. But if it's from their own job site, they can haul their own. There's nothing saying that they can't. And now we are seeing a lot of these, how do you want to say, load and haul operations popping up in Billings to where we have, oh, I don't know, I know 3 right off the top of my head. And what these companies are, these individuals are providing is basically a trailer and their pickup, and they drive around and they'll pick the garbage up for you and then haul it to the landfill. And I know I have filed a couple complaints with the PSC already on this operation. I haven't heard anything back yet because I believe they're probably gonna find that the people providing this service are claiming that the loading part of it is their primary focus for this kind of business, and the haul is secondary. So I think that's why I probably haven't heard anything, but we're seeing that more and more. And I've even had people inquire into it, and I've told them the actual legalities of the program for the garbage pickup service. And then they said, oh, okay, well, I wasn't quite aware of that. I didn't know that was a requirement to have a permit to be able to do that.
Regardless of what those other non-permitted haulers are doing, Mackenzie has to honor its permit, correct?
Absolutely.
So you're not free, Mackenzie isn't free to compete in the same way.
No.
And that's because of the way the law is written and because this asset of Mackenzie is a valuable asset that also has some limitations.
Yes.
Next contested issue. And we talked about this briefly at the beginning. If MT roll-offs granted a permit pursuant to this application, will that adversely affect Mackenzie? and let me go on, in a way that's adverse to the public interest?
What it could ultimately, the result ultimately, I guess, is a better way to say it. Let's say MT roll-offs is granted their permit, okay, so, as I believe one of the Republic officers quoted, what that does is when you have another competition in that area, okay, and let's say that they do focus on an urban area or a rural area. Okay, so adversely to us, what may end up happening if there are that many more boxes out there in that area, in the service area that we work in, it could affect pricing ultimately as far as our customers go. Because as we lose business, then obviously I still have assets to pay for. So I'm gonna have to make that up somehow. So it could adversely affect McKenzie disposal.
If it cuts into Mackenzie's revenue stream in any significant way, what kind of effects will that have on Mackenzie's operation?
It could be devastating to McKenzie's operation.
Will that affect people?
Absolutely. It'll affect jobs. It'll affect wages. It'll affect pretty much our business as a whole.
And so there's some public involved in that, the employees. You also got some public involved as your customers that would be affected by that.
Absolutely.
That's all I have, Brandon. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Oh, well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have no questions for Mr. Sandback.
Thank you very
Sir.
much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sandbeck.
Good afternoon.
The total annual revenue identified by McKenzie and its purchased in this matter was $4,818,613. Is that correct?
Yes, if that's what's stated.
When MT Roll-Offs asked in Discovery what portion of that was derived from roll-off services, McKenzie indicated that $1,102,117.70 was the portion derived from their roll-off services. Is that correct?
If that's what's stated, that's what's correct.
Well, let's just double check it.
Okay.
If you wanna look at Exhibit N, it's pages 2 and 3. It's gonna be exhibit.
I think you're right, Ally, it's on the bottom of page 2.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I didn't mistake anything yet.
Looks correct.
Okay. I probably wrote something. And then MT Roll-Offs asked about what portion of that was derived from fuel surcharges. And Mackenzie's response was $44,084.71. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Initially, when we asked the data requests, the number of roll-off containers y'all had was 218, is that right?
Yes,
Okay, and how many do you have now?
222 is where I'm at right now.
So you, in between when MT Roll-Offs filed their application and now, McKenzie acquired some more containers.
Correct.
We had asked a question about service denials, and you were here for Mr. Bauer's testimony earlier today.
Yes.
Does Mackenzie Disposal, do they quantify or keep track of times that they would deny service to a customer? If a denial existed, assuming a denial existed, is that something Mackenzie would keep track of?
I do not keep track of denials. The only time we would deny service to a person is if it's outside of our service area.
And I think there were a couple other instances that you cited, the only
I
time.
believe the other one is a hazardous material that I'm not qualified to haul.
And so your Mackenzie's service area is limited by what the city of Billings landfill will accept, is that fair to say?
Correct.
And they changed their regulations to say that they, would no longer limit where they would accept waste from. You could expand.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You look excited about that.
Yes.
That'd be nice, right? So conceivably, the way the permit, Mackenzie's permit is worded, if it's sort of just dependent on what the city of Billings landfill will take.
Yes.
In terms of customer complaints, does Mackenzie keep any sort of record on a customer account or a centralized record of people's complaints to Mackenzie?
Ally, we have a software program that's called WAM is what our software program is. And what we do is if a customer calls in with a complaint, those complaints are logged into their account. In WAM, there's a detail screen and we'll put those complaints in there. And obviously if it's a complaint, it's forwarded from the girls, I should say girls, from the office staff. Okay, from the office staff to either myself or to Amanda Bucket, which is my office manager. And if it's something that Amanda cannot remedy at the immediate time, she will forward it to me. And kind of as you can see, since we are a smaller operation, I usually know about it same day, usually within a couple hours. So yes, there is a formal logging system for our complaints.
Perfect. How many employees total at Mackenzie?
Mackenzie has 17 employees total right now, 19 including the president and her husband.
And 11 drivers total?
Yes.
6 of those drivers drive roll-off trucks?
Yes.
And the rest of the staff, is that customers, the girls?
The office employees, yes.
Will be fully correct.
Yes.
Does Mackenzie deal with any illegal haulers, hauling construction waste and debris in the proposed service area?
I have reported a couple, yes.
And how recently do you recall?
I want to say the last one that was reported was November of last year.
Do they pop up on a regular basis or can you tell is there a pattern to that or how does that work?
I wouldn't say there's a pattern to it, but yes, they do pop up.
Oh, you indicated during your testimony that the possibility of empty roll-offs entering the market could be devastating to Mackenzie, is that right?
Yes.
Can you explain to me how? I don't want to trauma porn or anything like
No.
that, but I would like to have you expand on that a little bit. What you think are the worst case scenario?
worst case scenario is kind of what I had already explained to Mr. Singer. If another hauler comes in, and decides to, and gets the permit, and they start out with the one truck and the 4 boxes, whatever, okay? They obviously are going to try to expand their business as well. I mean, we're all in that to expand and to be profitable, okay? That's the reason we're there, so. With the limited area that we have, with our 4-county, 2-city area that we have, we get another hauler in there, it could be very devastating to Mackenzie disposal as far as employees, assets, et cetera. So it could definitely affect our business. We're not a national corporation to fall back on another area, so.
And the jobs, the positions that you have at Mackenzie Disposal, is there high turnover on drivers or?
No, ma'am, actually, we have been doing very good with our turnover on our drivers. We have some very happy employees. And they are happy to be out there doing their job. You know, most of the contractors and customers that we work with, you know, they've got all of our drivers' numbers and they talk to them on an individual basis, so.
That's what I heard, most of the drivers from Mackenzie been there longer than 5 years.
Yes.
Are they all Class A CDLs or?
Not all, I have kind of probably a half, with Class B and the Class A drivers.
And is there a pay scale for drivers that Mackenzie has established, or do you?
I do not have a pay scale established.
Do you pay them all the same?
No, I do not.
What's the lowest rate you pay a driver?
Lowest rate is $25 per hour.
I wanted to go through Mr. Fifley's fight a little bit, if we could look at, I think it starts on, because it goes, the end of the document is actually the earliest complaint, I believe. It's at the back of Exhibit N, it's, the documents are marked MAC 1-25. But I will have you turn to page 8 and 9 to start with. That's where,
Are you looking at the numbers on the bottom down here?
I think they're the same, but I'm actually looking at MAC 8 and 9, and then I do think that's 8. So starting on page 8, about the middle of page 8, over to page 9, looks like somebody from the PSC communicated with you about Mr. Fifley's complaint, and I wanted you to take a minute to review that, so that you can refresh your recollection, and I can ask you some questions about that.
Okay.
Have you?
I did read over
Okay,
it.
yeah, I bet you did. Good job.
Yep, I read over it.
Okay, so it seems like there was some confusion about what Mr. Fifley was actually asking.
Correct.
And did you talk to 2 different people in the office, or how did that happen?
On my recollection as to how this happened is we had a new office person and they took the call from Mr. Fifley, and that was interpreted as needing 4 to 5 boxes all at once. Okay, so my route supervisor that normally goes out and looks at a demo request like this, because we will go out and look at it. Because there are times where you cannot put multiple boxes on a site, okay? And the other issue is obviously at this time, we did not have multiple boxes. And for that reason, he was turned down for the service. So after reading through this and getting a recollection as to how this went down, that's kind of how it happened. And then the miscommunication between the office staff and then with the route supervisor as to how this was supposed to go down, it had obviously made him very upset. And it was a pretty short time frame that he gave us to be able to get boxes out to him too, so.
And at the end of your communication to the Public Service Commission, It sounds like, Mr. Fifely said he was upset, no one called him about availability, so we have implemented a policy to inform waiting customers weekly so that they may find other options if necessary. Did I read that correctly?
Yes, you did.
And so is that something that Mackenzie does now? You have a
Yes.
waiting list?
Yes.
And do you call, or does someone in the office call everybody on that waiting list each week, or how does that work?
We will let them know, yes.
Do people ask to be taken off that or drop?
Absolutely. When we go through that list, what will have happen is, let's say they have been on it for 4 days. And in that time frame, they've already found something. We find that a lot of times they won't call us back and let us know. So obviously, we have to make that step so that we can take them off the list and then we can move to the next person, because otherwise we won't know. Okay, so yes, we have to make those updates and keep that list up to date.
And making that list, I mean, it keeps people in order in which they call, right?
Correct, yes,
And that's the fair way to do things.
correct.
If you could turn, I think, it's page 7, or page 4, what we were just looking at. So this, your email to the Public Service Commission, where it says, yes, he had 3 options with the job site being in the city limits.
Yes,
Is that your understanding that he did have those 3 options for this job?
yeah, because I don't wanna say he was confused. I know he had an agenda with his point that he was making yesterday. But he had also done a previous job with us that was south of Laurel, like he stated. And we worked with him on that job, okay? And then he called again about this situation, needing the 3 box or needing this area.
Sure.
And in that area, ended up being in the city limits. He was trying to take down 3 trailers up on the heights. Okay, and I think he got a little confused, but anyway, so that's kind of how that went down, and then we said, yes, he does have those other options, but.
Well, 'cause there's 2 timelines here, right? There's one in March and then there's one
Correct.
in June.
Right.
I just wanna make sure, you know, your interpretation, I wanna get that on the record.
Being 2 years ago and all the customers that I'm sure he serviced and we serviced, I can understand the confusion.
Sure. It sounds like, in your email, you're typically trying to, it sounds like Mackenzie is trying to swap containers within 24 hours for your existing customers, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, we do. We tell our customers that we can usually be there next day.
And if for some reason you can't, do you communicate with the customer?
Absolutely.
And then the last thing I wanted to look at on this was it's your last communication with at least on this March communications, on page MAC 3 and 4, I think this goes over to 4. So this one had originally started, Mr. Sandberg, back on it's like, Mr. Fifely called the Public Service Commission on March 9th, is that right?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm seeing too.
Okay, and then your last email on this specific call of Mr. Fifely's was March 23rd, is that right?
That's what I see.
Okay.
I don't even see where he has actually the initial call, because I looked at that last night too.
This is on page MAC 12. There's an entry that says 3/9/2022, 2:57 PM phone call.
Okay.
That-
Yep, I see that.
We good on that? Does that make sense?
Yes, I see it.
So, back to your communication on page 3 and 4, so then your last communication with the Public Service Commission about this specific call with Mr. Fifely's was March 23rd, is that right?
Yes,
And on March 23rd, your email to the Public Service Commission says that you still don't have a box for Mr. Lively, right?
Correct.
I don't have any more questions for you, Mr. Steinberg.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Brown? No questions. Commissioner Bukacek, any questions for this witness? Commissioner Bukacek, any questions for this witness? All right, and apparently she's not available at this moment. I do have some questions, based on
Mr. Chairman.
your testimony. I'm wondering, you said that an addition of 50 more boxes would cause harm to McKinsey. You also indicated that McKinsey operates in a very efficient, responsible way. The same things we heard from Allied. Given the good reputation and the competition from the city of Village, what underlies your assumption that 50 more boxes would cause devastating harm to McKinsey? Would your reputation and standing in the community be stronger than somebody who is untested?
Mr. Chairman, it's another business in our area that would bring competition. I understand that. But I also understand as the general manager for the business that I don't have 540 boxes at my disposal. So somebody coming in and taking customers from McKinsey disposal, possibly, if granted the permit, it could harm our business. It could be devastating. And if they continue to grow and expand, since they may be specific to the roll-off industry, and that's the business that they're gonna go after, then obviously that could be very devastating to our business.
Thank you. I understand now what you're saying could be devastating. It seemed to me that before you said would be devastating, which is to me a very substantial difference on that. Other witnesses have testified that they would call McKinsey, for instance, and that they would be told nothing is available now, we'll call you when something becomes available, and never got a call back, which seems to be contradictory to what you implied about calling people back.
When we had testimony from the other witnesses that were brought up, Mr. Chairman, I believe most of those inquiries that were given were in 2017 and 2018. And some of those practices were not implemented yet, sir. So we have updated, changed, made improvements, trying to provide the best service that we possibly can for those that inquire for our service.
In terms of your reputation, I think one witness said that shippers were leaving Allied and coming over to you in droves. That speaks well for the reputation of your company.
Thank you.
So you said, and I understand, without having a finance major in my background, it seems okay to me that more competition will be less of a profit margin, so therefore prices might increase, actually, which is sort of inverse to what you think of normally of competition. Wouldn't the benefits of competition of lower prices, wouldn't that counteract the necessity for raising prices? Wouldn't they balance each other out? It just seems to me.
Mr. Chairman, I think what we have, and honestly, is it just depends on the amount of business that is taken.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. You mentioned about the other unlicensed illegal haulers. And I just assumed by seeing those signs, they just had a pickup truck. That they were just taking trash from somebody cleaning out the garage or something else like that. Are you indicating that they are like commercial equipment, dump trucks and things like this that?
What I've seen, Mr. Commissioner, or Mr. Chair, is there are a few operating pickup trucks doing that type of business.
Yeah.
And there's also dump trailers, which a lot of the witnesses that have been up here have talked of. And I see that quite a bit here lately. I think what has happened is some of these people that have cut off from some of the other contracting companies, taken their trailer with them, and they decided, fine, I'll take my trailer and do my own business, you know what I mean? So that's kind of what I'm seeing, and it is becoming very prevalent in our area right now.
Somebody with a pickup truck, just, they're not any competition to you, are they?
Yes, they are in competition,
Okay.
yes, because they're taking away possible business.
Okay. One witness talked about in demolition, like of a house was the example, that there would need to be truck after truck after truck because one box would be filled up within 20 minutes. So there'd have to be a lot and went out of that business, albeit 5 years ago, because there was nobody available to provide that service to fill that need. And obviously, as you know, if somebody contracts for a job, the quicker they, time is money. Correct. Everything, it has that been addressed?
It has, we do have that option. Of course, it all is dependent on assets at the time, but I've done demolitions myself for contractors. And basically been dedicated to one contractor, one excavator, a demolition, and I ran for the whole day. And did 7 loads to the landfill myself, so we do have that option.
Well, thank you. Those are all my questions. Thank you for the clarifications and things that were a little confusing to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any, what? That's how I was supposed to, any, but this is called recross. Okay,
No further questions from the public.
thank you.
I have no further questions.
Yeah, please.
No, not.
Oh, no, I thought I said one. I'm sorry, Mr. Singh.
They rhyme, it's easy to make.
I've got a couple just clarification questions I want to follow up on. Ms. Garrett asked if Mackenzie had increased the number of containers it had while this application was pending. Did Mackenzie increase the number of containers because of this application?
No, we did not increase it because of the application.
Why did you increase them?
We increased it because we have a growing demand for our boxes, so.
And you're trying to meet
Absolutely,
without going out a while.
correct. We don't want to go bankrupt in the proceeding as well, so.
And then following up on some of the questions asked by the chairman. A competitor that comes in and doesn't have a fully developed plan, doesn't establish prices based on expenses, might establish prices that are loss leaders, so to speak, or trying to gain business. That sort of thing would be very dangerous to Mackenzie, I would think.
Yes, I suppose, yes.
And to the extent that the customers are coming to Mackenzie from Republic, it's been suggested, would that have something to do with the prices that Mackenzie's charging?
I don't think it so much has to do with the pricing, Mr. Singer.
But pricing is something certainly that customers pay attention to.
Absolutely.
So if a company offers significantly lower pricing, that could disrupt the market in a very significant way.
Absolutely.
That's all I have, thank you.
Well, it seems to me that, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I see no reason for against permanently excusing this witness. Is that correct? I seem to have lost my mic. Oh, there it is. Something happened. Good. So you are permanently excused.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Mr. Singer?
If I might be bold enough to suggest, we're not going to finish our next witness in half half hour that remains. I wonder if we could recess for the day and start again at 9. We'll be done either by noon or very closely after the noon hour.
I deeply appreciate your awareness of the situation.
Oh, second, Mr. Secretary.
We are adjourned until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you. Off the record.